Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going back in time to 1888, into the fog, the dark fog of London's East End, for a deep dive, of course, into, you guessed it, Jack the Ripper.
Oh, a classic choice. And a chilling one. Jack the Ripper, I mean that name. It's more than a name, right? It's like a symbol of terror, unsolved terror that we are still, captivated by today.
I know. And speaking of haunting, please like the video and subscribe for more stories and mysteries from around the world.
Excellent point. You've given us quite a stack of material here. There's historical accounts, there's modern theories. We even have some forensic analysis. Where should we begin this journey, you think?
Well, before we get into the blood and gore, maybe we should set the scene first. Can you paint us a picture of Whitechapel? Whitechapel in 1888. I really want to understand, the world these murders happened in.
Okay, so imagine a place where poverty, just desperation hung in the air. I mean, this wasn't the London of, royalty and high tea. This was a labyrinth of alleys, dimly lit cobblestone streets, slick with mud, and, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't a top priority.
So not a stroll in the park, huh? What kind of people would you encounter on those streets? Who lived there?
Oh, it was a melting pot. I mean, a melting pot of immigrants, many fleeing persecution, poverty. You would see dock workers, tradesmen, and of course women. Many women struggling to survive, some turning to sex work just to eat. Life was cheap, and often brutal in Whitechapel.
Sounds like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Just waiting to explode. And then into this already volatile mix enters Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, and his victims. The Canonical Five, as they are known, their stories, I think, they're more than just police reports. They offer a glimpse into the lives of these women who are often overlooked, forgotten.
Okay, let's talk about those women. I know, the basic details of their murders, but I'm really interested in understanding who they were as individuals, as people.
Absolutely. Let's start with Mary Ann Nichols, known as Polly. She's in her 40s, divorced, and, well, she was struggling to make ends meet, likely resorting to sex work to survive. Her murder on August 31st, 1888, was the first attributed to Jack the Ripper.
And that death set off a wave of fear, right? I mean, the brutality was shocking, even for Whitechapel.
Absolutely. I mean, the savagery, the attack, the mutilation, it wasn't a simple killing. It was a statement, a spectacle almost.
And just a week later, Annie Chapman became the second victim. What do we know about her life?
Well, Annie was also in her 40s. She was living in a common lodging house, separated from her husband. She suffered from chronic bronchitis, and alcohol dependence likely contributed to her vulnerability.
So both Polly and Annie, women battling, really difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
It seems like Jack was targeting those most, marginalized by society, the most vulnerable.
Yeah, and that's a pattern that we see repeated with the third victim, Elizabeth Stride. Her story, however, takes a curious turn. While she was found with a fatal throat wound, very typical of the Ripper's MO, there were no further mutilations.
The double event night, right, where Elizabeth Stride's murder was followed by another just hours later. Was that Catherine Eddowes?
Yes, Catherine Eddowes. Her case, unfortunately, fits the more gruesome pattern we saw with Polly and Annie. The brutality was, well, escalated. And this time, a piece of her bloody apron was found nearby, with a message. A message scrawled on it.
The Jew's message. That's the one that really ignited the public fear and anger, right? What do you make of that message? Was it a genuine expression of anti-Semitism or a deliberate attempt to misdirect the police?
That is the question, isn't it? A question that's fueled debate for over a century. The message, it certainly played on the existing social prejudices, heightened tensions. But whether it was a genuine reflection of the killer's beliefs or a calculated tactic, well, that remains open to interpretation.
It's a chilling reminder of how this case, how it taps into not just the fear of violence, but the anxieties of the time.
Exactly. And those anxieties, well, they amplified. They amplified with each new victim. The murders, the messages, the lack of answers, it all fed into a growing sense of panic.
And amidst all this chaos, you have the final canonical victim, Mary Jane Kelly. Her case is, well, perhaps the most brutal, disturbing of them all.
Indeed. Mary Jane was the youngest of the victims, just 25. She was murdered in her own room. The level of mutilation was unprecedented, suggesting a level of rage, depravity. Even seasoned investigators were shocked.
It's a case that sticks with you. Really a testament to the darkness this killer unleashed.
It also marked a turning point. After Mary Jane Kelly, the murders, well, they stopped abruptly. The question of why, like so many others in this case, remains unanswered. Did Jack flee? Did he die? Was he apprehended for other crimes? We don't know. The mystery endures.
So many questions, and we've barely scratched the surface. But before we dive into the suspects and those infamous letters, let's talk about the investigation itself. What were the police up against in 1888?
Imagine trying to solve a crime in a world without DNA testing, without advanced fingerprinting. I mean, they didn't even have reliable street lighting. The police relied heavily on witness statements, which were often unreliable, and physical evidence, which was difficult to collect and analyze. The technology was limited.
So it sounds like they were fighting an uphill battle from the start. How did the public react to all this? I mean, the murders, the lack of answers.
Imagine a city gripped by fear, with every shadow hiding a potential monster. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by sensationalist newspaper reports. Vigilante groups formed. Distrust of the police grew as the murders continued unsolved.
It's almost hard to believe that amidst all this chaos, the killer managed to vanish. Like a ghost. It's like he was a phantom, a figment of the fog itself.
And that's precisely, I think, what makes this case so enduringly fascinating. The lack of a definitive answer. The blend of fact and fiction, it all feeds into the myth of Jack the Ripper. But before we delve into that, let's talk about another piece of this puzzle. The letters.
Oh yes, the letters. Were they genuine? Were they genuine communications from the killer? Or just the work of, morbid pranksters trying to capitalize on the public's fear?
That is the question that has baffled investigators for over a century. Some were clearly hoaxes, attempts to stoke the flames of fear, but a few, particularly the Dear Boss letter and the From Hell letter, they contained details that suggested a disturbing familiarity with the crimes.
The From Hell letter, the one allegedly accompanied by half a human kidney, that's the stuff of nightmares. Did those letters provide any real clues? Or did they just muddy the waters further?
They did both, to be honest. While some details may have been genuine, the sheer volume of letters, many clearly fake, made it very difficult to separate truth from fiction. The letters, regardless of their authenticity, they became part of the Ripper's legacy, his macabre legacy, solidifying his image as a master manipulator who reveled in terrorizing a city.
Okay, we've got a terrifying setting, brutal murders, a struggling investigation, and those creepy letters. It feels like we're piecing together a morbid jigsaw puzzle. But what about the man himself, who was Jack the Ripper?
Now, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And over the years, there have been countless suspects, each with their own, tantalizing connection to the case. Some are more plausible than others. But the truth is, we may never know for certain.
Well, let's hear it. Who are the top contenders in this Victorian whodunit? What clues led investigators to their doorsteps?
One of the most intriguing is Montague John Druitt, a barrister who vanished shortly after the final canonical murder. His mental state and the sudden disappearance fueled suspicion, but concrete evidence linking him to the crimes is lacking.
A vanishing act always raises eyebrows, especially in a case like this. Who else is on the list?
Another strong contender is Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant living in Whitechapel. His documented mental illness and proximity to the crimes made him a prime suspect. And recent DNA analysis, it's added fuel to that fire, though the evidence remains contested.
DNA evidence, you say. Now things are getting interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, researchers claim to have found DNA linking Kosminski to a shawl supposedly found at one of the crime scenes. However, the shawl's, what we call provenance, is questionable. And the methodology of the DNA analysis, it has been criticized. It's a compelling piece of the puzzle, but not the definitive answer some might hope for.
So even with modern science, the mystery persists.
Yeah.
That's part of what makes this case so captivating, right? We're drawn to the unknown, right, to the unsolved.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole royal conspiracy angle,
right,
with Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson, thrown into the mix.
Wait, royalty. Now that's what I call a plot twist. What's the story there?
It's largely fueled by, conspiracy theories with whispers of a royal cover-up to protect the monarchy's reputation. However, there's no concrete evidence linking the prince to the crimes, and many historians dismiss it as pure speculation.
Well, it's a shame to burst that bubble. I was hoping for a bit of royal intrigue.
Don't worry, there's still plenty of intrigue to go around. But before we get lost in a sea of suspects, let's shift our focus to something equally fascinating, the psychology of the case.
You mean like what kind of person could commit such horrific acts? Is there a profile that fits Jack the Ripper?
It's difficult to say with certainty, but profilers, they often suggest a disorganized killer, someone driven by intense rage, a need for power. And likely a deep-seated hatred of women. The specific nature of the mutilations, the almost surgical precision, suggests a level of sadistic pleasure in the act itself.
It's a disturbing thought, trying to imagine the mind of someone capable of such, I don't know, calculated brutality.
And while we may never know definitively who Jack the Ripper was, understanding the psychology behind such crimes, it can help us. It can help us recognize warning signs and potentially prevent similar tragedies in the future.
Okay, so we've got the who, the why, and the how, but we also discussed the idea of Jack the Ripper as this cultural icon.
Yeah.
How has this one case, out of all the unsolved mysteries in history, managed to capture our collective imagination for so long?
I think it's a combination of factors. Firstly, the Victorian setting itself. I mean, it's inherently fascinating. The era of gaslight and fog, social upheaval, and burgeoning scientific advancement. It's ripe for storytelling.
Right. It's like a scene straight out of, I don't know, a Gothic novel. It's both alluring and terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. And then you have the mystery itself, an unsolved case, an unknown killer, a city gripped by fear. Our minds, I think, they crave resolution. And when it's denied, well, the story becomes even more compelling.
It's like a puzzle we can't quite solve, and that only makes us want to try harder and harder.
And let's not forget the true crime element. We're inherently drawn to stories of the dark side of humanity, maybe because it helps us grapple with our own fears and vulnerabilities.
It's like looking into a mirror, but the reflection is distorted, twisted. We try to understand the killer's motivations, maybe hoping to see what separates us from them, what prevents us from going down that same dark path.
That's a profound observation, and I think that's part of what makes the Ripper case so enduring. It's not just about the murders, it's about us, about our anxieties, our fascinations, our attempts to make sense of the senseless.
So Jack the Ripper becomes this symbol, this cautionary tale, this reminder that the darkness is always there, lurking beneath the surface of society.
Exactly. And the fact that he was never caught, never brought to justice, it only adds to the legend. It leaves us with this unsettling feeling that the story isn't over, that the mystery could resurface at any moment.
And that's why we keep coming back to it, right? To try and understand, to find answers, to maybe even find a bit of ourselves in the shadows of this case.
I think you've put it beautifully, the Jack the Ripper case. It's a journey into the heart of darkness, but it's also a journey of self-discovery, a confrontation with our own fascination with the macabre, and our need to find meaning in the face of the unknown.
It's a powerful thought. So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, what's the key takeaway, the thing you really want our listener to ponder?
I think the Jack the Ripper case, it's not just a gruesome murder mystery. It's a reflection of its time, of the anxieties, the fears of Victorian society. And it continues to fascinate us today because it speaks to something deep within us, something that compels us to confront the darkness and search for meaning in the face of the unknown.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to step back from the fog-filled streets of Whitechapel, at least for now.
But the story doesn't end here. We've got one more part to this deep dive where we'll explore the lasting legacy of Jack the Ripper and what it tells us about ourselves, about our society, and our enduring fascination with true crime.
Stay tuned, folks. We're about to go even deeper into the abyss. Okay, so we're back, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything we talked about in part one. It's like, we stepped into a time machine and found ourselves in the middle of a real-life horror story.
It certainly is a case that gets under your skin, that's for sure. But as we delve deeper into those suspects, the theories, and the cultural impact, remember, this isn't just a story, right? This is a reflection of a very specific time and place.
You're right. We talked about some of the key suspects. We had Druitt, we had Kosminski, we even talked about Prince Albert Victor. But the list seems endless. I mean, how do we even begin to navigate this maze of theories and possibilities?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It is a challenge for sure. We have to be critical. We examine the evidence or the lack thereof, and we consider the limitations of the time. Take Walter Sickert, for example. He was a painter, right? And some people believe that his artwork, they think it contains hidden clues about the Ripper's identity.
Hold on. Hidden clues in paintings. It's a whole new level of intrigue. What kind of clues are we talking about?
Well, at some point to similarities between his depictions of female figures and the Ripper's victims. Others see coded messages or symbols embedded in his work. It's a bit like those conspiracy theories where people see, hidden messages in the dollar bill or something.
I guess when you're dealing with a case this cold, every detail, every brushstroke takes on a whole new significance. You start seeing clues everywhere.
Exactly. And then you have Carl Feigenbaum. He was a butcher, executed in New York, actually. And some people argue that his modus operandi and his alleged confession, they align with the Ripper's crimes.
Okay, so now we have an American butcher. Adding an international twist to the story. This is getting more complex by the minute. But if we're talking about, I don't know, far-fetched theories, what about the whole Jack was a woman idea? I find that one particularly fascinating.
Oh yeah, that's a theory that has persisted. It has. It often points to a figure like, Jill the Ripper. The idea being that a woman could have moved more freely in Whitechapel,
right,
blending in, escaping notice more easily than a man. It kind of plays on those Victorian assumptions about women, the idea that they were invisible, harmless.
It makes you question like the assumptions of the time, doesn't it? Like maybe they were looking so hard for a certain type of killer that they overlooked other possibilities.
That's a really good point. The Victorian era, I mean, it had very, very rigid ideas about gender roles and criminality, which could have easily blinded investigators to alternative scenarios.
And it also speaks to, I don't know, like our own fascination with subverting expectations, right? The idea of female serial killer in Victorian London, I mean, certainly challenges our preconceived notions.
Absolutely. And then of course we have the theories that venture into the supernatural, Jack as a demon, a spirit, even a time traveler.
Wait, a time traveler. Okay, now we're definitely in the realm of fiction. But I guess those kinds of theories, they speak to our deeper anxieties, right? Our need to explain the unexplainable, because how else could someone just vanish into thin air?
You hit the nail on the head. They tap into our fears of the unknown. The idea that evil might be beyond our comprehension, something we can't control or predict.
Which in a way is scarier than any human suspect, right? Yeah. It's the idea that these horrors could happen anytime, anywhere, without reason, without logic.
Exactly. And that sense of unease, that fear of the unseen, the unknowable, I mean, that is a powerful part of the Ripper's legacy.
Okay, so putting aside the more outlandish theories, have profilers been able to, construct a psychological profile of Jack? Like what kind of person commits these kinds of crimes?
It's difficult to say with certainty, but profilers, they often suggest a disorganized killer, someone driven by intense rage, a need for power, and likely a deep-seated hatred of women. The specific nature of the mutilations, the almost surgical precision, it suggests a level of sadistic pleasure in the act itself.
It's a disturbing thought, trying to imagine the mind of someone capable of such calculated brutality.
And while we may never know definitively who Jack the Ripper was, understanding the psychology behind such crimes, it can help us. It can help us recognize warning signs and potentially prevent similar tragedies in the future.
Okay, so we've got the who, the why, and the how. But we also discussed the idea of Jack the Ripper as this cultural icon. How has this one case, out of all the unsolved mysteries in history, managed to capture our collective imagination for so long? Why are we still talking about this, over 100 years later?
I think it's a combination of factors. Firstly, the Victorian setting, the setting itself. I mean, it's inherently fascinating. The era of gaslight and fog, social upheaval, and burgeoning scientific advancement. It's ripe for storytelling. It really is.
It's like a scene straight out of a Gothic novel, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's both alluring and terrifying.
Exactly. And then you have the mystery itself, and an unsolved case, an unknown killer, a city gripped by fear. Our minds, I think, they crave resolution, and when it's denied, the story becomes even more compelling.
It's like a puzzle, we can't quite solve.
Yeah.
And that only makes us want to try harder.
And let's not forget the true crime element. We are inherently drawn to stories of the dark side of humanity.
Wow.
Maybe because it helps us grapple with our own fears, with our own vulnerabilities.
It's like looking into a mirror. But the reflection is distorted, twisted. We try to understand the killer's motivations. Maybe hoping to see what separates us from them, what prevents us from going down that same dark path.
That's a profound observation, and I think that's part of what makes the Ripper case so enduring. It's not just about the murders. It's about us, about our anxieties, our fascinations, our attempts to make sense of the senseless.
So Jack the Ripper becomes this symbol, this cautionary tale, this reminder that the darkness is always there, lurking beneath the surface of society.
Exactly. And the fact that he was never caught, never brought to justice, it only adds to the legend. It leaves us with this unsettling feeling that the story isn't over, that the mystery could resurface at any moment.
And that's why we keep coming back to it, right? To try and understand, to find answers, to maybe even find a bit of ourselves in the shadows of this case.
I think you've put it beautifully. The Jack the Ripper case, it's a journey into the heart of darkness, but it's also a journey of self-discovery, a confrontation with our own fascination with the macabre and our need to find meaning in the face of the unknown.
Oh, that's a powerful thought. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key takeaway? The thing you really want our listener to ponder? I think
the Jack the Ripper case, it's not just a gruesome murder mystery. It's a reflection of its time, of the anxieties, the fears of Victorian society, and it continues to fascinate us. It continues to fascinate us today because it speaks to something deep within us, something that compels us to confront the darkness and search for meaning in the face of the unknown.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to step back from the fog-filled streets of Whitechapel,
mm-hmm.
at least for now.
But the story doesn't end there. We've got one more part to this deep dive where we'll explore the lasting legacy of Jack the Ripper and what it tells us about ourselves, about our society and our enduring fascination with true crime.
Stay tuned, folks. We're about to go even deeper into the abyss. Okay, so we're back for the final act of our Jack the Ripper deep dive. We've walked those shadowy streets of Whitechapel. We've met the victims. We've considered the suspects, and we even ventured into some pretty wild theories.
Yeah.
Now let's talk legacy. Like, what's the lasting impact of this case? How is it still echoing through our culture today?
It's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, over a century later, Jack the Ripper's presence is still felt. He's not just confined to the history books. His story, it's seeped into our collective consciousness, influencing, literature, film, art, even music.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, where do you even begin? You've got everything from Alan Moore's graphic novel From Hell to modern TV shows like Ripper Street. And don't even get me started on all the Jack the Ripper tours that you can take in London. It's like a morbid pilgrimage.
It's become a cultural obsession, and I think part of the reason is that the Ripper case, it embodies a very specific kind of fear, a kind of fear that transcends the Victorian era and still resonates with us today.
Okay, break that down for me. What kind of fear are we talking about?
Well, on the one hand, you have the primal fear of the unknown, the unseen predator, lurking in the shadows. That's a fear that's hardwired into us. It's a survival instinct. It's as old as humanity itself. But then there's another layer. There's another layer to it. A fear specific to the late 19th century. The fear of social upheaval, of the underbelly of society, rising up and threatening the established order.
Just you're talking about like the stark class divide in Victorian London, right? The vast gap between the rich and the poor, the East End versus the West End.
Exactly, exactly. The Ripper case, it exposed those divisions in a terrifying way. He preyed on the most vulnerable members of society. Women living in poverty, women forced into prostitution, women who were often ignored, marginalized by the very systems that should have protected them.
So it's like he exposed the cracks in the facade of Victorian society.
Yeah,
The places where darkness could seep in and take root.
And the fact that he was never caught, never held accountable. It only amplifies that sense of anxiety. It suggests that even in a society that prides itself on order and justice, some monsters can slip through the cracks, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions.
Yeah, it's like he became the symbol of the fragility of that order. A reminder that chaos can erupt even in the most seemingly civilized places.
Precisely. And that's why even today the Ripper case, it still has such a hold on. I mean, we may not live in Victorian London, but we still grapple with these issues of social inequality, violence against women, and the struggle to maintain order in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
So in a way, Jack the Ripper, he serves as this cautionary tale, a reminder that the darkness is always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to emerge.
But it's also a story of resilience, of the human spirit's ability to persevere in the face of terror. I mean, think about the women of Whitechapel. They lived in constant fear, but they kept going. They supported each other. They fought to survive. They carved out lives for themselves despite the odds.
That's such an important point. It's easy to get caught up in the sensationalism of the case, the gore, the mystery, but we can't forget about the human cost, the lives lost, the families shattered, the trauma inflicted on an entire community.
Absolutely. And that's another aspect of the Ripper's legacy that we need to acknowledge. It's not just about the killer. It's about the victims, the survivors, and the ongoing fight for justice and equality.
Well said. So as we reach the end of our journey, what can we learn from the Jack the Ripper case? How can we apply those lessons to our own world today?
I think one of the most important takeaways is the need for vigilance, for awareness. The Ripper case, it highlights the vulnerability of certain segments of society and the need to protect them, to empower them. It also reminds us that even in seemingly safe and civilized environments, darkness can lurk in unexpected places.
And it reinforces the importance of never giving up on the pursuit of justice, right? Even if it takes over a century, the truth is worth fighting for. Even if closure remains elusive, the act of seeking answers, of shining a light into the darkness, it has its own value.
Absolutely. And while the Ripper case itself remains unsolved, the investigation itself taught us valuable lessons about forensic science, criminal profiling, and the importance of public awareness.
It's amazing to think how far we've come since 1888 in terms of investigative techniques. We have DNA testing, we have advanced surveillance, global databases, and ways of sharing information that were unimaginable back then.
It's true. But despite all these advancements, some mysteries remain stubbornly unsolved. And perhaps that's the ultimate legacy of Jack the Ripper. A reminder that there are some things we may never fully understand, some questions that will continue to haunt us, some shadows that will never fully dissipate.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to bid farewell. Bid farewell to the fog shrouded streets of Whitechapel, and the enigma of Jack the Ripper.
We've explored the darkness, confronted the shadows, and perhaps learned a little something about ourselves along the way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, keep your minds sharp, your curiosity alive, and maybe a light on in the hallway. You never know. You never know what lurks in the shadow.
Until next time, stay curious.